In today's Mind Chat, we'll have the pleasure to have with us Iberdrola. Iberdrola is an energy conglomerate from Spain, and I have the pleasure to have with us today Diego Díáz Pilas. Hi, Diego. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, Alberto, good to be here.
Good to see you again. Diego, first of all, congratulations are in order. Iberdrola also this year made it into the top 25 corporate startup stars, that are the corporates that are globally recognized for their effort and concrete action in open innovation. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's always to be happy. It's always great to be recognized. And it's been a few years now, and we feel honored. And also that comes with a responsibility to actually even boost more our work with startups and entrepreneurs. So thank you very much.
I think it's well deserved, and I think it's a sign of the work that Iberdrola and again your team has done in the past few years. And just to wrap it up to our audience, first of all, it might be good just to give a brief description about Iberdrola, the size of the company, just to have a usual reference for the company.
Absolutely. So Iberdrola is a large, vertically integrated energy company. I think it's important that at least in our views, the energy companies of the future are the electric utilities, and that's something that we can discuss later. So we have more than 50 gigawatts of generation assets in different countries, with a focus in the UK, the US, Mexico, Brazil, and Spain. Those are the major markets. So we are starting to grow in other markets such as Australia and even Japan. 2/3 of our generation capacity is emission-free, so that's totally no CO2 emissions. And additionally, we have grids, which is a growing part of our business in also Spain, UK, US, and Brazil. And we serve a population of more than 100 million people. So all in all, right now we are in the middle of a very strong investment cycle. We just announced a couple of weeks ago that we will be investing 75 billion with the euros between 2020 and 2025, because the energy transition is starting to actually accelerate right now. So from Iberdrola, we started investing in renewables more than 20 years ago. We kind of anticipated that trend. And right now we see that renewables are really going to grow exponentially over the next 10 years. And the next big trend that we are, let's say, surfing, and that's very related also with our ventures activities, is electrification. So electricity is being decarbonized. In many countries in Europe, we will be well above 70% of renewables in just 10 years, in 2030. And that's huge, right? But still electricity is just 25% of final energy demand. So less than that in the world, and about that in Europe. So if we don't grow the importance of electricity in final energy demand, even if we decarbonize 100% of electricity, we are not decarbonizing the energy system. So the real challenge that we all need to work on as a society is in increasing that 25% to 60, 70, 80 plus. Good news is that we have the technologies, we have what we need to actually do that. And we need to actually work with all the large partners and, more importantly, and we will talk about that, entrepreneurs and startups to actually achieve that goal. Because decarbonization of electricity is on its way, and now we need to actually electrify the economy in order to decarbonize it, which is the goal that we all have as society.
And that brings us to our today's conversation, that is how a company like Iberdrola is supporting this mission through innovation. And just to wrap up, I think two of the parts where we believe as external observer that Iberdrola is doing great. On the one hand, I think you have fine-tuned what today is defined as the venture client model, meaning working as a customer with startups. And on the other hand, you have been integrating the venture client model with corporate venture capital activity. And this is again, the overall description, probably, at least from an external perspective, of what today Perseo is doing. So can you elaborate a bit more about that and provide us a bit more details?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started working with startups and entrepreneurs 12 years ago. That was back in 2008. So back then, was probably one of the first programs regarding working with the startups in the energy industry in Europe, definitely. So the rationale is that we believed back then, and we still do, that startups are going to be actually very, very key for this energy transition that I was describing before. We need to move fast, and startups are good at moving fast. So we need to actually unlock new services and products for the customers, and startups are good at that. And we need to improve the way we help renewables growth with other technologies such as IoT, artificial intelligence, and new business models, and startups are very good at that. So that was the rationale for us to actually create our program. And our program has two parts, as you were describing. Probably, I would even say 3 tools, right? Because the main goal of the program is actually to, if you were able to grab innovation from the startup world and put it into Iberdrola, that would be our mission. So let's take pieces of innovation and let's put them into Iberdrola. Of course, that's a very aspirational mission, like any mission should be. And we have actually several tools that we've been, let's say, fine-tuning over the years, as you were saying, to actually achieve that mission, right? So first tool is investment, and we started with that one. And investment is basically, hey, we invest usually minority stakes in startup companies that are growing products or services in areas that we believe are going to be key for our innovation and for our growth. We can go to examples later, but that's kind of the rationale. And at that point, we have already invested nearly $80 million in startups around the world that are focusing on the energy transition. So that's the investment piece. Second tool is more of the, let's say, venture client / pilots. I always find venture client to be a very aspirational word. Of course, if we do it right, it will be venture client. And I believe we are. This is about actually rapidly testing technologies coming from the startup world in our businesses and in our assets. So we do roughly 30 of those projects per year in many different areas, and we can discuss the areas in detail later. But this is about being agile and also about unlocking let's say, for the startups, the possibility to work with Iberdrola, which is mutually beneficial for their growth and for our own innovation, right? We do 30 of those per year. And to give you a figure, only in 2019, we purchased 56 million euros from startups and newly created companies. That's a figure that we track very frequently, because we believe it's very related with the innovation that we are able to actually channel towards the company. And then the last tool, which is also related with the venture client model, but it's, let's say, a more recent tool, is the challenges tool, right? So, okay, we do investments in companies that are growing and we help them grow. We rapidly test technologies into our assets and with our customers, but sometimes we need to be, let's say, more open in our pain points and challenges in order to the startup community to actually help us tackle them. So we created a year and a half ago the Iberdrola Startup Challenges, which is about making a global call worldwide for specific pain points that we have. And we are very open in sharing the details of those pain points / opportunities that we have. And we receive a growing number of startups that propose solutions for those pain points. And we have already launched 7 of those. One of them is still active at the moment, and we will be doing more next year. And we have received nearly 700 proposals, and we have 12 ongoing pilots as a result of those 7 challenges. So this is a bit of refining the venture client model with, let's say, the challenges goals that allow us to be very specific and very open in what we need. So this is, let's say, a way of complementing the traditional RFIs / RFQs more focused in the startup and entrepreneur world.
I think it's quite interesting. Again, the move that you have done into the challenges areas, on the one hand, might be, as you said, considered as an evolution of the traditional RFP or RFI. So the way typically large corporation contract, definitely more agile, more flexible, more dynamic. On the other way, that's the way I interpret it, is also an evolution of the concept of corporate accelerators, because corporate accelerators have been working with calls, have been driven by calls. And the fact that a company adopting a venture client model, meaning more interface to more mature solution, has integrated the concept of the calls, but with a very, very, very more stringent focus on real business, current business coming from the business unit. That's the model that you're following, is probably, I think, the additional way we can interpret the evolution that you have done in the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, let's say, corporate accelerators, within, let's say, and we still have agreements with many accelerators around the world, which are not, let's say, our own accelerators, but help us, let's say, increase deal flow and increase our reach. Quite honestly, we were considering in the past to do our own corporate accelerator internally with usual different cohorts and so on. We have agreements with many accelerators around the world, and that's a great way for us to be, let's say, increasing our deal flow and also being in contact with the last trends. And even if the startups sometimes are not ready to work with us, having in mind what type of new business models they are coming up with, it's very, very relevant for us as let's say, as an antenna of what's going on out there. We thought in the past about setting up our own accelerator, but quite honestly, I think that's, in our understanding, that's not probably the best solution for both startups and corporates, because let's say that sometimes you're pushing too hard to actually make the two worlds be closer ahead of time. Usually startups that participate in accelerators are early stage startups, and there are some exceptions to that, but that's the usual drill somehow. And you need to get them ready to work with a corporate in 3 months, right? The usual 12-week period or 16-week period or whatever. And in our experience, that's usually takes a bit more time than that. So we prefer to actually keep track and keep monitoring the progress of startups and help them with input informally without making them participate in a 12-week program somehow. And once they are ready, they get into the venture client model. And in this monitoring, the challenges play a very, very important role. So absolutely, I think it's an interesting model, but simply for us, we rather go the way of venture client plus challenging approach rather than a full, let's say, corporate accelerator model.
Yeah, and by the way, at least from our observatory, the corporate accelerators model is definitely trending down, because again, we are seeing definitely less and less corporates that are deciding to open a new one, or many of them are in a certain way or downsizing or restructuring, or even some of them even shutting them down, because as you say, dealing with early stage startups for large corporation is not probably the best fit. And so the venture client model, at least from what we can see, is probably the most effective way, because essentially you are balancing current and near-term needs coming from the business unit with later stage startups, the one that we call scale-ups, definitely are ready or close to be ready to go into a commercial deployment, and passing through POC pilots is the way to test them in a quick and fast way, and then if the test is okay, you can move to full deployment. That is actually the best way to reach results. And how do you, just to provide some example, in terms of some example of this kind of collaboration that emerged from this model, can you provide some cases?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are many interesting cases. I would probably highlight a couple of them at this point. So we launched a challenge a few months ago on PV panel cleaning, right? So that's an area that is always an area that we've been somehow looking at, and the solutions that were out in the market were not good enough in terms of quality and cost. So we thought the startups, could be a great fit for that. We launched this challenge, and let's say let's clean PV panels in a cheap and efficient way without wasting water, and that's the challenge that we came up with for the startup community. And we actually received more than 70 proposals and nearly 80 proposals around the world. We selected 5 companies to actually pilot their solutions in our Núñez de Balboa power plant, which is the largest PV power plant in Europe. And we are super happy with that, because we are somehow showing that these new entrants can be reliable partners for something that is very, very relevant and very, very key to the core of our renewable business. So that's let's say one of the first of its kind, right? This is not about some challenge that I will see if I use for something. This is a real need in the business that is being, let's say, tackled by startups, and it's being used right now and trialed in detail and upscaled in our largest, let's say, and probably most important up to now, PV power plant in Europe.
And all of this in a period of time that is a couple of months. And so that's
absolutely, and that's the beauty of this, right? So you, from the moment that you start defining the challenge to the moment you actually are trialing the solution, you are talking sometimes between a couple of months and sometimes between 3-4 months. But any other model up to now would have been, let's say, 6 months to a year at least.
Yes.
So that's one of the
when things work smoothly, I would say.
Yes. Yes. And that has a huge impact, because it's not only that you are more agile with the let's say with the requirements or whatever, you can be agile, but it's also how agile your partners are. And I think one of the startups sometimes lack the scale, for sure. They sometimes lack the, let's say, the reach, and we are there to help on that. That's for sure. They cannot afford having a cohort of key account executives chasing us, of course. But what they are definitely good at is in agility, right? If they are posed with a challenge, they are super good at tackling it very quickly. And that's one of the, let's say, keys of this model.
Yeah, again, let's focus a bit more on this, because I think it is a central focal point for open innovation. Because open innovation, I think the good news is open innovation is turning into reality, also in Europe, and that's the good news. That again is a trend. That's something that is getting better and better since the past few years, and that's the good news. The less good news is typically also when you find the right startups focusing on the right need. You have done all the due diligence, you have done everything, you tested it, works. It takes not forever, but not exactly a couple of weeks. So substantial amount of time. And timing is essence in this world, specifically talking about innovation. And I'm pretty interested to understand better the model, because again, one of the typical barriers, we have an innovation unit that is a sort of a gateway from the external world into the internal corporate world, and there are the business unit that are the real kings, because again, they're the one that will make things happen. And if they are not on board, typically nothing happens. And so what you did to bring them closer to the process, again, based on your challenge model, they are definitely involved in the definition of the challenges, they are involved in the selection, they are involved in the testing. Can you give us some parameter that might be also of use for other corporates that are fine-tuning, adjusting their own formulas?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the first thing I would say about that is that somehow they were already on board, because when we launched our startup ventures program, they are the key stakeholders here. So we have a startup committee, let's say the Perseo committee, and all of our business units are represented with senior representatives. and they are part of the whole process. They are part of the decision-making process. Do we launch this tool? Do you think it's interesting? Do we don't launch this tool? We go this way, we go the venture client way, we go the corporate accelerator way, we go the only venture investments way. So they've been participating as key sponsors in the decision-making process before we have launched any of the tools that we use, right? That's the first step. So first, we don't launch a tool if we believe it's not going to be useful. So this is not about Iberdrola looking as an innovative company. Of course, that's a byproduct of doing innovation, but that's not the rationale for doing innovation. If it's the rationale for doing innovation, then you're in trouble. So first is, hey, what targets do we have? And that's why we started with investments. Then we thought we were missing, let's say, agile testing and agile scaling up, and that's why we went for venture client. And in the third phase, we thought, and the we includes our business units, we thought we should be more open with the challenges, and that's why we went the challenge way. So that's, let's say, the senior sponsor approach. And then on the more, let's say, operative way, let's say we are in charge of everything that it's related with the outside. So we are in charge of searching for the best startups. We are in charge of publishing the challenges. We are in charge of using our network worldwide to actually flow it with this opportunity for all the startup ecosystem. We are in charge of receiving and filtering the proposals, but the business is in charge, and that's very important, of the definition of the need. Of course, we help them frame it, and we help them, let's say, we do the dirty work, but the definition of the need needs to be a business need. Otherwise, we don't launch a challenge. So there needs to be a business need. That's the first step, with a business sponsor and a project manager that help us all through the process. Okay. Once this is launched, we do the dirty work of filtering, coming up with a number of companies that we believe are interested based on their criteria and the need. But finally, the final definition of what are the winners and what's going to be the pilot looking like and what's going to be the relationship looking like is actually on the business unit. And there is usually an own budget that we can complement from our own budget, but there's a budget from the business unit to actually bring the project to life. So it needs to be a very coordinated process. Otherwise, you are not serving a real innovation need, and you are just, let's say, looking innovative, but that should be a byproduct. That shouldn't be your goal. Well, it can be, right? But at least that's not our case.
Let me play the devil advocate here and say one of the typical downside of closely involving the business unit is that you are too much focused on what is called Horizon 1, some immediate needs, and you try to lose a bit the long-term vision, the future direction of technologies. How do you compensate that? I know the answer, but I'd like to hear from you.
No, I think you have different tools for different needs, right? So if you have, let's say, a long-term need, you have your scouting, you have your alliances with your accelerators, and you also have your long-term or mid-term investments somehow that you can go through. Let's say that the venture client model, at least in our view, needs to be focused in a short to mid-term need. So otherwise, you can actually invest in a company for the long term, of course, and you can monitor and do a scouting for the long term. But if you are telling a startup that, hey, you're going to have a contract here to showcase your solution, there needs to be a need in the 6-month, 12-month range. Otherwise, hey, congratulations, you did great. You know what? We're going to call you back in 3 years, right? So we could
actually, this is a real story that I've heard. I remember a big insurance company say, "Oh, that's this very, very cool solution. Can you schedule a meeting for mid next year?" This is a real story. So this is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what's the tool again? This is my next question for looking more long term that Iberdrola is using.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. So First, the scouting and the agreements with accelerators and incubators. Then some of our investments are long-term and some of our investments are short-term. So we do a bit of those. And then we have a very strong technology prospects area that we use for actually try and anticipate what's going to happen in the mid to long term. And startups are a fit, in terms of our startup work is a fit in that process, but it's not the only one, because I think there's also this trend that we've seen in open innovation that a startup should be, let's say, the only input to your innovation model. And I think that's not probably or at least in our opinion, that's not the only input that you should have in your innovation model. You should look at what other large industrials are doing, what new entrants, which are not yet startups or which are not no longer startups, are doing, and you should look at, let's say, also what your competitors are doing. So this is not only about a startup will tell me what to do in 2030. It's not so simple. I wish it were, right? So the startups are a part of the innovation model. There are other inputs like large industrials, digital companies, our vendors, on the hardware side, traditional suppliers are also part of the equation. And we do this technology prospects exercise that we try and forecast the cost and impact of different technologies in the 5 to 10 year time frame. And the work with the startups feeds onto that model. But it's not the single answer to your innovation and future trends needs somehow.
No, that's very, very true. Actually, with many of our customers, what we do is exactly running such session, mostly showing not even what competitors are doing, but also showing them what other companies are doing in areas of potential move or future expansion for the company. Because again, there are today one thing that we are experiencing is that the industries are disappearing. The boundaries between the different industries are totally overlapped. And so we need to really look at what other companies are doing. Sometimes are interesting the way they're approaching certain areas, despite it's something that you never do, but the way they're approaching something that you can replicate. Or maybe there are some interesting companies that are entering into areas that might be a potential area of future expansion. And so today we see that sometimes we are engaging for doing scouting, but most of the time what we really do is to provide ideas and directions for potential diversification and expansion choices of the corporates. That is where the new trends are coming out, and that is another potential new area. Going a bit back on the investment side, again, what kind of investment vehicle do you have? Is a closed fund? Is an evergreen? What's the size? How does it work?
Yeah, so we allocated at the very beginning an amount of money. So right now we have a 70 million euro fund, which is somehow evergreen. So we can allocate more and we use the proceeds to actually keep on investing. And we have, let's say, used already the proceeds that we have from past investments for new investments. So that's kind of the approach, and there is the option to actually top it up with additional funds in case they're needed. But so far, we have divested some companies that were able to, let's say, feed new investments. So regardless of let's say, the structure, which perhaps it's a bit more boring, the rationale for the investment is actually to, let's say, partner and help grow companies that are active in segments that are relevant for our own growth. So that kind of symbiotic relationship, right? So we've done investments in things like energy storage. We have done investments in things like energy efficiency and electrification of heat. We've done investments in things like electric mobility. I can give you one example in a minute, but all of them are areas that are, let's say, great opportunities for us to grow and where we need to move fast. So when we partner with, let's say, scale-ups, like you call them, I believe it's a very, let's say, accurate term, because they are not, most of the times they are not startups, they are growing very fast and with already relevant businesses. Then we take, let's say, a participation in those companies, and we go beyond the venture client model, and we have, let's say, a deeper relationship. That's the case, for instance, of our investment in Wallbox. Wallbox is I could say, the largest, without hesitation, the largest company in Europe in terms of sales and technology in charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. So we were a part of their Series A last year, and we will be a part of whatever growth opportunities in terms of investments are coming up the way. And they are doubling sales on a yearly basis for the last 3 years. This year they will do that again. And they are helping us achieve our ambitious plans of having 150,000 charging stations in the next 5 years. And one of the reasons why we are moving so fast is because we are partnering with Scale Up and with a company that is leading the technology side in this area, and that is, let's say, help us grow faster ourselves. And that's the rationale for the investments, and that's the rationale for our ventures program, and that's what we've been doing for the last 12 years. And right now, with this huge opportunity that we foresee in electrification, we only see that type of relationships growing.
And you contributed a lot in the revenue bump, because we are not the only customers, but again, you are invested, and again, you're really exploiting both angles, the venture client and the investment side.
Absolutely. I think in the case of Wallbox, we are not, of course, I would say that we are not even their largest, but so we are one of their largest customers, and that's of course helping them gaining references in the market. So that's symbiotic at that regard, and we are early adopters of their technology. But we don't foresee. I think we think it's important that this type of companies work with many competitors, even direct competitors of ours. So this is not about closing a relationship. This is about nurturing and having, let's say, a heads up and a competitive advantage because you are there earlier and you're quicker and you have deeper ties. But this is not about closing the relationship with these companies on the market, because otherwise you are harming yourself, right? So if you are the only customer, you are not helping them evolve their products, you are not helping them grow and scale, and ultimately that's not going to be beneficial for you as a customer either, right? So that's very relevant in our model. That's an open model. So all these startups that we invest in work with other large companies, they work with industrials, and they work with customers. We need to be a strong customer and a strong partner, but by no means the only one or a restricted one.
That's what you just said. That makes a lot of sense. We see that most of the time when it comes to concrete application is not that easy and not that often replicated, because again, particularly many corporates still have this exclusivity need that they want to have, because they think they have the feeling that putting money into startups or scale-ups, helping them grow, helping them test the solution, helping them deploy the solution, helping them bring the solution to deployment to commercial grade, and helping them to become also an interesting potential suppliers of competitors is something that is very, very difficult to be digested, and most of the time that's create a loop, and at the end you don't get out of the loop.
But that's a vicious circle somehow if you actually get in there, right? So I think exclusivity should be let's say a consequence of the commercial relationship, not a consequence of the venture relationship, and that's a very relevant let's say difference here. So if whatever customer is offering you volume and is offering you a competitive, let's say, edge as a startup, then you could think about exclusivity in several markets, or you could think about exclusivity in whatever segments or whatever. But that shouldn't be coming from the, let's say, the venture relationship. That should come in any case from a healthy commercial relationship.
that's the difference that we see, and that we try and keep the boundaries very clear in that regard. So as a venture investor, if you claim for exclusivity, you are basically doing a bad business.
But I'm pushing this concept even further. I believe that exclusivity discussion also in a commercial relationship, you really nurtured, because again, you help the early testing, you help them to make the solution stronger, deployment great. I believe is not the right approach. I think you just said it before beautifully, that your exclusivity is moving faster and earlier than the others. And this is better than any commercial contractual protection that you can get. And the time that you lose for forcing, channeling into something that is a tight jacket at the end is not producing value. But again, easy to be said, difficult to be applied at the broader scale, as you know, our overall business, and this sometimes is very, very frequent. Very good. A final question to ending our conversation is what beyond the venture client and the investment models, what you guys are doing today? You know, there are different trends. There is a lot of discussion about entrepreneurship and about venture building. What is Iberdrola is looking at, is doing in this area?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing venturing for more than 12 years. So let's say we have a mature, I would say, approach and operations at that regard. That's well beyond usual, let's say, venture programs. So I read some time ago that usual venture programs within large corporations, they usually don't go beyond 5 years. So that means that we've been able to go beyond the hype somehow. So that's working for the company and bringing benefit for the company and for the startups. So we are launching, and we are starting to think about a new approach. And you've probably read the news recently. We launched a company called IberLyzer. So that's a company that we are, let's say, participating from our ventures program with a very strong partner that is called Ingeteam. That's one of the largest integrators and power electronics companies in the world. So we are partnering with them to actually, let's say, develop hydrogen technology, specifically electrolysis technology, in Spain and Europe. That's an area, green hydrogen, where Iberdrola is going to be growing very strongly in the next 5 to 10 years. We believe it's going to be an area that is going to be key for reaching, let's say, 100% decarbonization of the society. So first thing we need to do is electrify. Electricity can give you to 85%, and then you have that last mile that you need to actually look at other energy vectors, and green hydrogen is a very promising one. First, we need to clean hydrogen production, and then we will tackle that, right? So we were thinking, hey, how do we do this, right? Because there's a lack of let's say, established providers with, let's say, a local footprint that is relevant for Europe. I think we need to be, let's say, very, very cautious here and not to repeat past mistakes in terms of relying on, let's say, fully on a non-European value chain. And quite honestly, we thought there was still room and a lack of relevant players. And we looked at the ventures, we looked at investments, and we didn't find the right match somehow. We thought, hey, let's go the venture builder approach, right? So we have launched this company, we are growing it, we are together with our partners coming up with the business models, looking for technology alliances. We announced the first one recently with the world leading company in electrolyzer technology, which is NEL, right? And we believe this is going to be a first of a series of, let's say, venture building efforts that we are going to be doing starting right now, because we believe there are great opportunities for actually, let's say, a start that's going beyond, right? That's beyond partnering with startups that, of course, we will keep on doing. That's becoming a startup for a relevant application that you believe you have part of the skill set, this will be done, in our case, through partnerships, and most likely, most of these partnerships will be with the startups. So we are not thinking about doing it on our own. This is always in an open approach, but we believe we are already mature enough in innovation and venturing to actually go down the road of, let's say, launching and nurturing and growing our own venture builder. So this first IberLyzer is the first venture builder initiative that we've launched, but we are foreseeing a number of those actually growing and being launched over 2021.
And if you should define, also for the benefit of our audience, what are the main ingredients of a venture builder compared to other approaches, what they are?
I think they are a good combination of, let's say, the horsepower of the corporates with the agility of the startups. That should be the aim here. So the aim should be that we move as quick as a startup with the resources and the reach of our own large corporation. So that should be, and that's in our view the mission and the challenge.
I like the definition, and I think it's the perfect way for completing our conversation. So Diego, thank you so much for the time. Congratulations again for your well-deserved award, and let's keep up the conversation open, because as we can see, we will have a lot of interesting models to be discussed coming from Iberdrola. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alberto.